These rooms are really cool. This is like a normal. It's not normal. Like it's never this warm when I've been in here.
I've taught people in like this one.
I don't know. Maybe it's just my classes.
It's a rat. It's totally a rat.
The classroom was really windows everywhere because the space heaters all were so hot.
Everything's centrally controlled, and the windows are bolted shut. This floor might not be. All the lower floors are bolted shut.
So you can't have the windows to cool down.
And the in-room control doesn't do any good. And if you call, they just kind of laugh again.
Yeah.
TPD.
Sure. If we open the blinds, it's gonna be.
Well, I wasn't gonna open the blinds, so I was just gonna see if the window, I'll shut the blinds back.
Oh, the window itself will open?
I don't know if they
I don't
do it
think
all
so.
in this building.
Yeah. I don't think they're actual windows, I think they're just
Oh, yeah.
illusions. We should try this and slow.
I tell you,
It doesn't
you get mad at me.
No, no.
No, I get it.
I teach in this building, it doesn't do a thing.
Chilling. Yeah, I bet.
Alright.
Let me just update my stats real quick. Getting the bubble.
And it's a flip 4 or 5 right now. Mm-hmm. They're great. So sweet. Yeah.
I'll just flip it.
Sweet, sounds good.
Great.
Or maybe like the one round that starts early.
Maybe. Alright, is everybody ready? The criminal justice system is predicated upon a power that creates an anti-black matrix where all groups are pitted against each other in competition to distance themselves from blackness at the bottom, make it closer to whiteness at the top. All policy making mystifies the relationship of slavery in the context of the criminal justice system, which means politics makes substantial gain insofar as it sidelines the fates of black and favors discussions of contingency, which is still predicated upon the devastation of the black community based on the deindustrialization of the political economy, dismantling of the welfare state and installment of the prison industrial climate. 2009, the problem that will continue to endure slavery's aftermath is closely in terms of society struggles of criminal justice and evidence collects perhaps more than any other institution study racism, not only starts to but conviction or understanding betrayed implicit face in the system, capacity to reform, not willingness to face the evidence that white supremacy save all are two sides of the same coin. Who are the police of the slave society? Who are playing the role of the white workers today? Who are the slave patrol that oversee the boundary cover the slave trading market? The point is not to reduce one's argument that imprisonment today is slavery. The white supremacy creates an anti-black world that captured all race within its binary logic. Second principle of slavery for the contemporary study of criminology that the functioning of police has been contained the political desire of the white worker by buying him to the state. It's not surprising then that the slave patrol were the first organized police from this nation's history tradition of Western liberalism, and also reside at its core lineage of emotional investment in individual a greater urgency given a racially stratified word to be a fraudulent person. On the other hand, it's been called a person human being. There's only one subsistence needs about working belong to the blackest while one punishes blacks not restricted to the people with problem rather as the problem people blackness remains to the state is such a marker of criminality and deviant black existence in a signified criminal serve as the central metaphorical and structural purpose for white person bourgeoisie society society. We need to recall the destruction of black community, deindustrialization of political economy, dismantling of the welfare state installment in the prison industrial complex. Now we affirm a study of the underside of this year's resolution. Criminality is the polemic behind legalization, affirming a study of criminality center. Black men in the forefront of discussion because slavery created a perpetual state of imprisonment. Rodriguez. And 7. Yet it's precisely because this reproduction of the regime relies on the incapacity to decisively dehuman its captive mass, success regime, logic of power creates an arsenal of historical apparatus that was stitched to the mark of global formation of racial chattel, slavery, and while simultaneously structured to particular technology, violence, bodily domination, the mass of human departure, translating middle class to capture, enforcement will have that one day pocket moment, the non-name subhuman, the prototyping of the normative black punishment, the white new world, the blueprinting of the abstract black president of the Euro-American modernity, the middle pass, the foreshadow of the prison, and the route to the act, chattel slavery, constantly voted to path and centrality, and geography of enslavement and condition of opponent existence itself to thus contemporary prison regime captured and immobilized the descendants of slaves and non-slaves alike. I consider its technology evolved to be inseparable from the genealogy of transatlantic black and African captivity and punishment, while the human volume of middle classes has been a subject of empirical and methodological debate. Now the prison industrial complex begins at the level of the school, the privatization of the epistemological policing apparatus. In order for us to have a meaningful deliberation, we must center discussion on the school to prison pipeline. Rodriguez and 10. The structural symbiosis of the school of policing and the prison state is evident. Administrative public policy, pedagogical innovation, the war on drugs, tolerance, no child left behind, school-based militarization, school to prison pipeline, these putative iteration of increasingly carceral schooling industrial complex, how it represent a systematic reflection of the race state and white supremacy social formation generally are producing new categories of social identity, redefining over there are third categories of social subject that are apprehended natural in the state as gifted and talented, undocumented, gainfully exceptional at risk, and who are then by automatic necessity hierarchically separated into protocols of pseudo-standardized intelligent quotient socioeconomic class, race, gender, sexuality, neighborhood, geography, etc. The prison apparatus of the regime in this concept to how prisons are not placed in a part of our everyday life, but instead shaping the former addicted community, the modes of social interaction. The U.S. president, in other words, has become a model for power realism more generally, in which institutional authority in this time of the policing and surveillance capacity of the state are the broadly cultural and purely juridical racial and gender criminalization of particular social subject, and the practice of systemic bodily immobilization, carceral permanence, the normal routine, the free words to trace the movement of the prison, modeling a power relation to the side of the school to understand that move policing, surveillance, criminalization, and immobilization are much as schooling practice are imprisonment practice. Teacher is generally be asked to treat the flow of the administration workers, intellectual, capital, school to prison conflict, two thoughts are worth considering. When teaching how it's constituted by the technology of the prison regime in the school is inseparable from the prison industrial complex. That's the purpose of your balanced discernment, the affirmation of either team's reading of the law and subject and the underlying assumptions behind civil society. The slave search is essential, putting departure for GO and I Sexton. It's just the debate about colonial policy of assimilation is disconstituted debate in which phenomenon intervening respectfully into slavery, in particular freedom struggle is strung to engender the market critical dish for slavery that reduces colonial people to the molten state, uniquely enabling the metropolitan powers to pour them into a new multi-process with the personality of the native first choice of operating enslavement in the collapse of social structure because the short contradiction of combination might provide any more proper living recommendation for the introduction of slavery. One might say to suffer condemnation the unenviable unless one is enslaved. You may not be free, but at least one is not enslaved. You may lose your motherland, but you will not lose your mother. The latter case of social death when kinship is denied entirely by the force of the law is reserved for natal alienation, genealogical isolation, characterizing slavery, the alienation of the slave from all formal legally for force of ties of blood and from any attachment of group to locality, other than those who live for because of forced submission of the slave with absolute any sense whatsoever of reasoning and intending rationality are recognized solely in the concept of criminal liability. The slave is only recognized as a criminal will, a criminal reasoning, a criminal intended criminal rationality, while these are otherwise human capacity construe that indictment of culpability before the law of the potentiality also resistant and rendered illegitimate. The disqualification of black resistance by the logical racial slavery is not unrelated to the long-standing cross-racial phenomena in which the white border and proletariat revolution on both sides of the Atlantic can alibi themselves that revolts against slavery. Slavery must call itself that process of the French and American Revolution related to the Russian and Chinese Revolution, or with anything the indigenous reclamation of Renaissance. One of the defining features of contemporary political and intellectual cultural culture that the metaphoric term for that appropriate black slavery as the template for non-black grievances the relation of slavery lives on the function of child slavery are largely maintained despite the efforts of reconstruction preserved in the surrogate institution under Jim Crow. The ghetto, the prison, slavery lives on and survives despite the great attempts and under the institutional life forced by the international movement against slavery, segregation, and mass imprisonment. Now, walling in the contradictions, they cycle political necessity to theorize life in the death or the afterlife of slavery to understand the law of dependency of black and sex and 12. To interrogate the racial discourse of the life of philosophy, to demonstrate the question of life cannot be pride from the authorities of the problem of the Negro, the problem for thought is dubious, and the fact of blackness, social life and social death is much an inquiry about the nature of nature that is about the politics of nature of politics. In other words, it is metapolitical no less than it is metaphysical. The question is whether that remains whether a policy that affirms such life can avoid the phenomenological data and that it does not affirm its own special death and need to affirm affirmation through negation, not as a moral imperative, but as a psychopolitical necessity. It's not in a combination that is to the anti-black world, the affirmation of black, which is the affirmation of the philosophical beings of refusing to sit on oneself from black and valorization. of minor differences that bring one's culture to helpless life or sociality in the world, structured by the twin acts of white superiority and black inferiority of white existing and black, non-existing in the world, structured by the negative imperial bubble, do not be black optimism, in negation of the Afro-Pessimism, just as black social life do not negate black social death by vitalizing in nothing, in Afro-Pessimism, there is no black social life, only that black life is not social life in the universe from the culture, state, and society of citizen, and subject of nation and culture, people in place of history, and here to all things that colonial society has in common with colonialism, all that capital has in common with the necessity of the movement of the Afro-Pessimism minority, a point from the Afro-pessimism is not the most political dimension of Afro-pessimism. The project black life is not social, or rather, black life is lived in social death. Black social life frustrated the police power, and it so-called the very act of policing in the first place, the policing of black freedom. It is to aim at the dreaded profits and the rhetoric, not understanding the logical, and also priority to the unorthodox, self-predicating activity of black manipulation of exterior upon which polices. The violence perpetuating concealed through the law, progressive reforms failed the criminal Hartman in 97. The dual existence of the slave, the person and property was generated by the slave modes of production law attempt to resolve the contradiction between the slave, the property, and the slave, the person and laborer, and at least by this change by attending to the slave, both the property and a purpose, and on the other hand, the labor, the increased liability for white felon coming against the slave. On the other hand, the law continues to decriminalize the violence that was sought necessary for the preservation of the institution and submission of the beatings of the slave bluntly, stating the violence and subjugation considered and extended itself to Austria, and legislative concern the slave was considered as a subject, and insofar as he was criminalized, a wounded body or mortified by paradoxically, this designation of subjugation utterly negated the possibility of punitive and vulnerable or pleasurable embodiment, and said that the black captive vantage in the chasm between object, criminal, and pain body and mortified flesh, the squall characterized by black criminality and imprisonment, the result of a continual racialized neoliberal nation building process that began with slavery and persists to the current moment, Rodriguez and 11. The intertwined sociological of racial chattel slavery, white supremacy, multiple racial genocide, and constitutional, institutional, and political license that cannot be contained within the time limited framework. We will ask how the institutional, cultural, and epistemological inheritance of the racial genocide will perpetually lead to prevailing political images, century gains, black genocide, temporality, and the nation-building process and wins. Blacks have been brutally oppressed and questioning since 1619. Blacks have been addressing a post-civil right, sexist capacity are being redirected and administered through a total social planning that inevitably would evolve in complete obliteration of the epistemic century of the plans to mind obliteration, season to delineate the states of code emergency that can be sued or solved with the piecemeal social reform, a stopgap economic investment, or popular signification of racial diversity and multicultural national cause. If this methodology allows to live in the present and future time, the genocide are not only naturalized, but they come imperceptible. Now, our performance is good. Posted in 2012, the young people have emerged, and the leaders in this as like something that we think is right.
Well,
you can
so
say
what
that
if
it's
the
not.
negative has a different true statement? Is it just like perm?
I mean, no, it's a question of if you have a better reading of the law than we do.
How do you decide better when different people, like you say, that there is
or
one
I guess
dictated
maybe
by
the question of you proving us like so. I guess it's kind of indicative of what you would probably read in the 1 and C. If you read like something like framework, that only bolsters.
But I'm saying
I haven't answered your question. Like when people try to read framework issues, which they do quite often, like say that we are not supposed to be within this space. Even after we have presented an advocacy that
that explanation.
No,
of
that's completely correct. I think to add to that, it's the way in which bodies are, I guess, performed. When when black people perform in the debate space, even though we can be seen as okay and communicative, we're still criminalized. There's
why
still
is
a
that
layer
the case?
to
This evidence,
criminalize.
that your section
What do you
evidence
mean, why
seems
is
to
that the
question
case?
whether there can be sort of persuasiveness
No, that is
No, it's
not
not about
saying.
persuasive.
in the first place.
That is
No,
not
it's
what
talking
I'm
about
saying.
why the slave resistance is already rendered illegitimate, which would be like
right, but why
already
is it possible
within
for
the
you to
debate.
persuade anyone if that is true?
That's not that question doesn't
I have
make
another question.
sense.
I understand the argument in your first card about why current policy approaches mystify the relevance of slavery, etc.
Yeah,
but
sure.
where in this card do you think it's made an argument about that being inherent to policymaking? It seems to be talking
Yeah,
about
that's
narrow
like one of
understandings
the first
racism,
lines that I
ignoring
reread.
the role of the police,
Yeah,
etc. Why are those inherent?
Right. So even laws that try to incorporate things like race, Woods goes on to say that conventional narrow understandings of racism fail to understand that white supremacy and state violence are two sides of the same coin. I haven't even finished.
State change preclude recognizing that?
It's not a question of state.
That's what
change.
it's talking about. The state will try to recognize itself and have these small piecemeal reforms. When it tries to do that, it only conceals the violence that it perpetuates.
Okay.
This becomes a more nuanced understanding of why we should be considering the black as criminal and able to exterminate.
A good example of this is police cameras. It misses what's essential about the death of Oscar Grant. We knew what happened. We knew what happened to Mike Brown or even the guy in New York. What's his name?
Judges, do y'all want to be on this? What's your email address?
Justin W. Kirk.
Justin W. Kirk.
At Gmail.
I got you. Jack,
You want
you want it?
Yeah, Jack.
16.
Okay, I have your
No,
email.
it's like soon after, so for one second,
Okay,
that was-
NDT Round page. Okay, I just sent it. It's one off in the case. I'm just gonna set some stuff here.
You can use our tub if you want.
Yeah, it's a little short.
Yeah.
Appreciate it though.
I don't know if you included me in the.
I think I did. I
I
just have like a delay sending, so it might take like another 10 seconds to get to everyone's inboxes. But like, if your email address is the same as like the other 2 times we debated you, then. Do you have it, Gio?
Mhm.
Everybody has it?
Nope, I'm pulling it up.
Okay, no worries. Just over it. One off, yes. They haven't pulled over.
Just got it.
Okay. Anybody not ready? Sweet. Top County A interpretation of violation of the affirmative should defend the desirability of topical government action most predictable of the ancient and verb indicated debate about hypothetical government action ever since each topic state should do action U.S. and U.S. should adopt policy agents up to the first or section should adopt to put a policy into action to government reduce specification directions limitation the action designed to legalize means to make lawful by judicial or legislative sanction based on dictionary no date legal sites to make lawful by judicial or legislative sanction like in general a subject is not enough debate or requires specific point of difference in order to promote effective exchange time working for 13 debate cannot prove decision like identification of a question you can think of many concerns to be addressed in a conversation about topic that debates not like to be useful without particular question identification line number can excise to be resolved second controversy by such a party should understanding about the difference and specific comparison the argumentation to effective decision making or sending results important decision by definitely debate requires a general proposition prices such a for appropriate or do something about that focus for discussion they can agree that funny points of clarity and solutions that precise questions results more proper discussions open up by placing focus on the search with proposition bench more force and express identifying difference of price and depth of argumentation to facilitate a better decision making and place on some decision we're talking about the as even the fair time much basis for the argumentation that the general substance to two reps on the state of issue could avoid creating interpretation makes or can be interpretation may be very engaging so point B is versus that a vote neg first in preparation and class changing the topic pose a vacuum manipulates balance of correctly structurally favors the because they speak last and permute alternative strategic fairness is key to engaging a well-prepared opponent second substantive regulations that demarcate what limits are necessary for dialogue refusal to tailor claims for normative public stances shuts down the possibility for discussion and democratic perspective Isaac and 6 Portals begin to express the experience of marginalized groups like community or different consensus and conceals oppression and asking other groups instead of like concerns being marginalized in the ethnic forms of expression, especially but I want to abolish communication the importance of the terms in which engagement occurs and difference by perceived matter of being open conversation to a democratic attitude company to remarks might be opposed to people's strength respect on a procedural or fair discussion needs a person on regular political results to the consensus of regulation cannot be procedures and apply anything else in terms of social and regular principles of communication or for the kinds of claims that worthy and respect these authors associated the suspicion of consensus but in routine for ultimate and need principles to regulate the substance sex the impact outweighs the deliberative debate models and part skills vital to respond to existential text Lumberg and democratic capacity motivated critical thinking analysis claims informed decision making and judgment political and advice to the investments view politics particularly a solution to warrant giving up position capacity to change debate those skills outline research and decision impact and to evaluate evidence and arguments and increasing information rich about important political energy new information finding those are problems that citizens who need to make about who traits against increasing complex environment matter topic students identify the evidence for responsible for debating so enhancing deliberative capacity accommodation and critical thinking for processing capacity thoughtful engagement authorities for debating on crucial corner democratic life and on a measure creating self-critical open meaningful political engagement democracy facing challenges clean class racial justice environment destruction climate intervention conflict more than any specific proposals citizens liberation for greater scale provides the best hopes for dealing with technology sex tailoring Identity claims to common topics for deliberation is possible and desirable. The one is to affirm topical action and peace of debate. Its engagement, not exclusion to Anderson. Its importance and argument to democratic culture's arguments such as appeals to identity, arguments key to economic reason or subject to the ocean of authenticity of question legitimacy that should not be subject to challenges of principle because reason false universal, some are always involved in exclusion argument is a form of such ideals so democracy life ultimately upon procedure of argumentation is a legitimate self and keeps central institution about the idea that arguments someone to a person out of the ability system of the source and notion anytime to ask people to agree upon persons and argument is a course without available performance identification focus on across the extension taken in impartial agreement people should justify their position dialogue that they hope to live in a plural society where the relation between sound position and perceived that sometimes not ethos or argument of debate involves taking distance taking distance once we give an identity so such a correct that articulate claims of relation shared ideals characterology can be used so that they argument appeals to personification as a theory is a complement to a critical gender through conducting a gender liberalism procedural by advocating ethos argument ethos are linked to democratic debate and self argument here contextualize the competence of academic and practical and political forms of institution marks into the critique of as far as argument impulse one to take as identity side and ideologies I didn't need to understand the perspectives of others keep it commonality to live together democratic politics and accommodating a wide variety of expressions what ideas is when they have an effective and misfits that brain on reflection contributing to the recent announcement champions given refuse or to liberate their most of the narrative or performance and narrative or resolution of persuasive because it is contained on personal reforms or prompts understanding giving different community users like political positions and legislative agendas and debate inevitably evolves exclusions and normative constraints, making sure those exclusions occur along reciprocal lines necessary to foster democratic habits, which also against Anderson and embracing an alternative would involve the opposition more than just when we allow senior practice to be so overlooking politics a way to ability anti-exclusionary politics with exclusion is over a protector of who we are in opposition politics or attempt to resist it. Post-hoc research sensitive about both exclusion evaluated criteria from properly normalization again. Exclusion is appear and acknowledge in our political players ability once exclusion cannot appear to be a normalization in society universe and ideal examples of exclusion and this is a mischaracterized community for reason identifying going self-critical process we have competition practices enable democratic formation as we begin acknowledging exclusions how many such activities on orbit as a side handshake based comforting and number of essentially about it implicates operates and amplified by same infallible principles community could affect this or reduce certain evil and discourse with the line democratic consultation community protects and clarify where low the precondition of such activity but just like it's one of our such as aim such a positive power of clarifying my one critiques so not mean that such critiques will not require scrutiny but neither does mean that such critiques will be shown exclusion or community connections can identify practice that foster democratic casting practices normalizing best stable or project and no recourse for documented condemnation ex minimal guidelines to ensure relative balance in the debate are necessary for necessary to effectuate democratic engagement or subjectivity can create provisional meaning while combating the worst excesses of our Cartesian rationality. The process of argument of exchange is the best way to solve their offense. They can't critique without linking to their offense. Dahlberg and 5. Human practice actually just on the force of an argument to produce democratic citizens subjects on motive of the power of the transformation of sports freedom and rather than normalization to act according to norms and the same as the normalized and normalized structure which critical reflection take place is very cosine. Arguments for engagement despite claiming to purpose of prior rationality to subject to explain the escape contradiction in form as we excluded for discourse which limits participation which includes domination resulting from discourse and the context of process where that power cannot be separated from public service the son of being thought production cannot be achieved as one public will to date this kind of structure and sense of critical center for the language and call communication community interaction it's not so Cartesian to somebody subject to subject always situated in the public sphere positive positive subject rather than subject center of rationality as we communicate interaction manipulation or remove the ideal sensation and adequate given inequality harness and process of harmonization even following identification and inequality and that's the community inequality stable to have under things provisionally achieve a subject such as a reflective distance and maybe lend to revise or conceptual what is valued and says action is starting according to the source framed over problematic claims have a certain amount of mutual understanding of resource with engagement argumentation on communication presupposed mutual understanding in terms of use shared presupposition of or critical discourse be entertaining case. Debating pragmatic legalization policies key to generate empathetic and institutional change progress is possible. Colon 11 after 40 years of the increasing incarceration and widening racial disparities and trend lines here appear to be shifting incarceration and dropping racial affairs are something that once the system mandatory minimums are limiting minimums reducing criminal penalty directing new rules for alternatives in incarceration and politics is more susceptible arguments about cost and benefit adoption of a overstated within change direction something less good news we might be misunderstanding energy policy is not really to recognize the change that's well competent the government starts to facilitate further change way to push for change to create further improvement of the relative reduce criminal sense reduce the lines of criminal punishment to declare how we present the public pragmatic argument need to be paired with moral appeals from empathy gap next racial progress has occurred through legal change in more in the area of drug laws. It's still possible to reject pessimism because ignore specific reforms that achieve lasting reductions in inequality only in 13 world races world in the US appears from the some important reforms of new instruction structural oppressions that identify US sometimes we discredit the US as capable of influence more or less source inclusive of the white racial dominance of not change without US history Mr. Mechanism and racial politics systems of rights I think we overly inflate changes for raw civil rights and overlook the business of equality even not whether right table rollbacks on gays or limits with authority to achieve the use of gray racial condition change some reforms prove reversible this power for force and right detecting each force of immigration naturalization and loving the virginity to social change transformative significant ways and important partial ratio for the race region for division take place on both the state and across the side most important constitution in 1996 so the race moves and benefit inclusion of racial definers and democratization of structurally racist side but also recognition and validation by both states of the side of racially defined activism then a broad and deep and democracy even that needs to involve constitutionality to color to reveal the transformative character of the concept like somebody catching all word of the racial reaction we agree critique of incarceration also to be understood beyond race and deeper political implication with consider certain incarceration and restricting it and increasing the impact of voters of color for the horse and new Jim Crow represents incarceration and political issues not only proved dimensions of use socially there. I've been preview slaves from they can be chessed for get resistance not fetal which conflicts not really political realities and racing sex over people covered on powerless say I've been enormously increasing racial inequality by and concerns option continues discourse not just why raising to within the same civil society movement make fair effects of racial subjectivity within psyche and body a political bias anti blackness is not an ontological antagonism. Conflict is inevitable in politics, but it has to be demarcated around whiteness and blacks. The ontological fatalism, ontological fatalism recreates colonial violence. 13. Exclusion, inclusion, over great ontological, sort of political, never started most of brothers under work decided in advance. Ontological fatalism, I have seen what is social life to be divided by layers and divides. Colonial divisions, altogether, the continual structure, and data started, ultimately fixated whiteness, may be considered as unfollowed, avoided black being, trying to zealot, and substance, which all more social wrestle against loss of specificity, ontological differential, not identities, described liberties, so whiteness, and lacks are subjected. Against practices which can always be identity white, struggling for reactivation, colonial objectivity next to you law is obviously problematic, but that's the reason we should hold it accountable to live up to its ideals, crunch on the opportunities to define structured by institutional life after attraction. Also often know how to avoid negative consequences, engaging reform systems, or proper structure, reflection, institutional interpretation, and challenge that allows people to demand change in ways that reflect how logical institutions that challenge master chief down, reflect institutional logic will probably affect reforms that certainly come from existing repertoire of options, powerless people come those are sugars, cars, by challenging it by using some logic against their sugars and powerless people, force over the country to condemn it, actually, their real rather than using a country to suggest American social village and reproach their decisions that should real dramatic access, rise and tell sites seeking, restructure reality, or reflect American mythology by some of the results country to make anti-West essential. Okay. Crenshaw is marked by granting rights. I just want to get that mark out there before we start crossing. Let me mark it in here too.
You said it's marked in where?
By granting formal rights. If you control F that, it should pop up. You got it? Okay, sweet. Just want to get that out of the way.
Alright, all year we've had this av on the wiki. You have a lot of coaches who are helping you prep framework against our av. Why would it not be more substantial for you to have prepared a argument against our literature base? There's a lot of authors who criticize the way Sexton's arguments. Why not just read a K of us focusing on ontology rather than have a policing strategy that says we should not be here?
Well, so it's sort of about the model debate that's presupposed by the 1AC versus the 1NC. Our Steinberg and Freely evidence indicates that for effective communication and exchange to happen, there needs to be sort of a stasis or a stable point of difference between the two sides, right?
Yeah.
So
I
I agree.
also disagree that this is not a response to your affirmative. That's the Anderson evidence about.
I think you missed the point of what the question. Why not have just have a criticism of ontology, something like that, rather than having policing mechanism with the 1AC literally is spending 9 minutes criticizing. You are saying that we should not be here and should be rejected for it.
I don't think that we've said that one, you shouldn't be here, or two, that you should be rejected for. It's rather a question of how we think that politics should go down that the 1NC has raised.
Who does the app exclude?
Second, to answer the initial question.
I'm going to move on now because I only have a limited amount of time. Who does the affirmative exclude?
Pardon me?
Who does the affirmative exclude?
Who does the affirmative
Yeah.
exclude? I'm not sure if the app is exclusionary. We just think that there's a certain amount of debate that's presupposed.
Yeah, I'm asking you, in our model of debate, who do you think that we are excluding?
Are you asking about the Anderson?
I am asking who in our model of debate we are excluding.
When people are excluded from reading, for example, their arguments against.
That's not her question. Her
Because
question
there is
our
hold
model
on.
of debate.
Just you're basing exclusion off of people can't build links off of certain arguments.
We don't think under either interpretation people literally can't be in debates, which is.
No, I'm not talking about bodies not being here. My question is who do we make it impossible to engage with in our arguments?
Well, you undermine the negative's potential to engage, which is
the general negative. I want to know what arguments you don't get to read.
So you can't read our. Sorry, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just any sort of policy-related literature related to the.
Why is that true given the fact that you have forwarded an argument for why reformism is key? It seems like you do have access to that argument.
Well, we can't make
No,
arguments.
I want your
about
partner to answer the question that Brooke posed, which is what do you not get to read?
I just answered that question.
No, I debunked that by saying my statement, so answer the question. What?
I don't know what your statement was. So
I'm gonna move on. You had a card that talks about how there's ways to incorporate racial equality into things like the law. It's things like the Voting Act. If people are still don't have access to voting because there's still discriminatory laws that because of the social structures that are inherently anti-black, how do we change the way society perceives certain bodies with a law?
Okay, couple of things. First, that I think you're referencing that piece of OMI evidence just indicates that historically there have been shifting trend lines when it comes to racial progress. I'll agree, shit's not perfect, duh. But our argument is that change is possible. Second, we've got a piece of coal evidence that indicates that.
What's the bright line for change?
Pardon?
Like, do you just mean that like things are different from 1950 and like?
I mean,
You
Omi
think
would
that's
say better, if that's like the.
Yeah, but like we were
Yeah,
having this
all
whole conversation. When is he crossed is better kind of is arbitrary. What is the metric for determining good change?
The metric for determining good
Yes.
change? I mean, our Omi evidence indicates that there's just like more access to certain institutions that folks can use. I guess that's like a decent metric. Like I really don't understand what you mean by the phrase metric for measuring change.
Like
Like what?
calculus? I don't know another
Like I know
way.
what the word metric means.
Right. I'm aware of that. So I would think that then, like, because we're saying that the world is not fundamentally different than it was, like, maybe 20 years ago.
Okay, well,
Or 30
then,
years
well,
ago, or
if
50
that's what you're
years ago.
saying, then I do think that Omi says, yes, it is different.
Okay. Are you good, Theo?
Okay,
You have 921.
yeah. I'm gonna write that down.
Case framework. Thank you. Good. The one he sees necessary to create an epistemic break to the ontological condition, to the ways in which civil society is predicated, creates a criminal justice and is predicated upon the devastation of the black community, which means that the affirmative is a party question. They've conceded over Rodriguez 2007 evidence that makes an argument for the understanding of legalization of criminality, which is to say that the criminal justice system stems from the plantation system that stems out of the devastation that created civil society's economic prosperity, which means that the one he sees is necessary to creating a genealogy that comes to grips with the material conditions that create the epistemic conditions that create our material reality. That's the concession of the last piece of Rodriguez evidence at the bottom of the case. Additionally, they have conceded the school to prison pipeline argument that the Rodriguez 2010 evidence is making an argument for. It's not a question of whether or not the physical prison can be reformed. Rather, it's a question of the colonized mentality that the Western world has, which is to say that the one is necessary in order to create a point of reference for us to have the pragmatic solution that the first piece of evidence is saying. Those are three. Another reason for why you reject. Another reason for why this is a non-starter is because they've conceded the piece of sex and evidence that's making an argument for why pragmatism is void because the illusion of equality is pragmatic years occurring in 2008. Equality created both the measure of humanity and desire of the blacks and includes the humanities can be revealed through the African and descendant blacks, such as the historical and cultural orientation. The person identifying with the oppressor is an ontological act and replaces the existence with the criteria of the people embracing the imagination. Why to the danger to the idea of equality is seduces the people to embracing the subject the danger of equality is that it seduces the black imagination to believing the possibility of distinguishing its own existence. As Farley says, there is no outside to the color line equality, only a source of an imaginative allure, a fantasy. This is the reality that must be a conceptually disengaged with the demands of the equality. It requires to recognize rationality. Individuals are historical. The course is on black and by white equality form forces black to mistake humanity and analytical truth. Black resistance is not based in the analytical humanity. Instead, it's trying to meet the credentials that whites have been placed in humanity. Genuine black resistance must be rooted with the development of asserting a new cultural world, and only the affirmative accesses that new cultural world. They have conceded that the standpoint epistemology of the one AC begins with the demand of the criminal, which is to say that the demand of the slave, which puts at risk all of the notions of criminality. Additionally, they make an argument that they read Omi 2013, but Curry evidence is directly response that Hudson says that anti-blackness is not ontological. But even if they win that argument, it's not a reason to reject the one AC social social problematization of criminality. In other words, Rodriguez 7 evidence is making an argument for why, even if it's socially, since the beginning of America, blackness has always been linked to criminality. That is also the Hartman evidence that goes considered another reason for why you reject them. The Crescio 88 evidence is already responded to by the Rodriguez 7 in my analysis above of the analysis above of the piece of Curry evidence. But even if you don't believe us here, it's the material ways in which the debate community can effectuate the political change, which means that we are a priority. This is posted in 2012. The young leaders have been emerging leaders of the performance of the debate community, the critique, the uplifting, the struggle, the continued liberation. These young leaders are most defined racialized opposed to the interest of the to change the rise of the boat. Many debate peers are involved in both Baltimore groups. The leaders of a beautiful circle, LBS has developed a platform regarding jobs, education, incarceration, many other issues facing black people in the city. The training, therefore, is not in the abstract of the day. Training of the real one and their own political empowerment of their community addition in politics. Their idea of the political is stuck in a Eurocentric notion where the political arena has to be the Capitol Hill, which is problematic and forgets all the people in the margins. Onto the framework argument, counter interpretation. We have to begin the debate. The question of the criminality here are three net benefits. The first is the school prison pipeline argument that Rodriguez is making an argument for. All of their framework arguments is predicated upon us creating a political engagement with the federal government in order to create and effectuate change. But this forgets the margins, the carceral states in our mind, which is the epistemic argument that we're forwarding on case day. The second subpoint is the redress argument. The Woods is not evidence to make an argument for why we cannot make problems of the contingent problems, i.e. people don't get shot because of marijuana policies or because of gambling problems. Rather, they get shot gratuitously which is to say for no reason. That's the Sexton evidence that makes an argument for why, though, when he sees a psychopolitical necessity. The third net benefit is a piece of Rodriguez evidence that goes to the bottom of the one he sees that makes an argument for why peace mere reforms forgets the genocidal nature of America, and we will continue to trip if we don't acknowledge the fact that our shoes are untied. This is an example that I'm giving in cross-examination about police camera. It's not a question of whether or not we see the police officer doing a bad thing. The problem is not police brutality. The problem is policing in and of itself, because it's already anti-black. They have conceded this argument. Now they are policing inside of this debate round. It's also something that you should reject. This is bullshit. Northwestern knew exactly what we were going to read. We not only disclosed, but this is a national debate tournament. Last debate round, it's a bubble round where they, instead of engaging with the substance of our argument, rather decide to become the perfect cop. If this is the heuristic of the debate, then no wonder that their Anderson evidence is making an argument for why the status quo of debate will always be exclusionary. It's because of motherfuckers like you. Additionally, their notions of limits are anti-black. This is Wilderson in 2008. Once you're guilty of once stability and reforms, white people are guilty of asking themselves the question: how can we maintain the maximum order with minimum change? Because white people love their institution and love their country and love each other. And every black and brown body that doesn't love the threats that you love is a threat to your fantasy space. Your terrain is sheared, passive revolution has a way of incorporating black folks and brown into either church of the debate. White people are geared to a structure of debate which reproduces the institution reproduces. America is always and everything. The bad thing is never on the table. We will incorporate color forwards into the fort at our own place, provided that we're team players and they speak highly of us, pretend to care about the things that we care, but we won't entertain the racker who shits on our fantasy space. We've killed too many Indians and worked too many Chinese and Chicano figures to the bone. It's that incarceration and genocide of too many black folks. When by the time that you have a right to the compromise over normative faculty of your efforts to enlighten whoever doesn't die off of the field falls into the earth of the prison, the sister has already been raped and the brother has already been busted. But then again, you've had a difficult day as well. Additionally, the Sniping Speech Act of the one is already a dissad to their framework argument. They say that some people are already will always inevitably be excluded from the status quo form of debate. This means that you have to take a leap of faith toward the new form of debate. There is no reason for why our form of debate cannot coexist inside of this space, this space with us. This Dr. Sherry Brinkley in 2012 shut up and type complaining about framework and do some research. There is black literature being reproduced every moment, every day. Now here's the fear of the problem was only answer the debate community would be do some research and cards and nothing more than the change. And so stop doing research. They don't do things of the performance movement, the intellectuals, because they have already decided that they're anti-intellectual. As a matter of fact, they're the fear of the debate community producing scholarship rather than regurgitating every debate. It's about regurgitation of information rather than the production of it. We are not being advanced to the administration's way of the debate community. So the administration really want to feel we need to change our focus from regurgitation of information that is really already producing in the academy into engagement, which we're already producing new knowledge. We're just not making use of intelligence, intellectual power. That is the debate tournament. Additionally, they say the limits debate. There's the Drake 2006 evidence, but they have already conceded that the notion of limits is already bounded against the black Americans, because we're seen as the antagonism to the very idea of democracy, which is subsumes all of their the democratic deliberation argument. Because our argument is that democratic deliberation is only created for an inner human discussion of what benefits them. A good example of this is the idea of the New Deal, which only benefited white and Irish and Italian workers while displacing black female workers in the South. This is an example of democracy not functioning. They might say the civil rights to solve for this, but Martin Luther King said it himself that he feared that he was walking black folks into a burning house. Additionally, their attempt to not engage is not a benevolent, we don't know what to say, or we're quote unquote engaging you. Rather, it's about securing the old boys club. This resistance debate in 2012 black community discussion, neither random nor power natural. We have tried to discuss the discussion. We regularly drain no wrong form argument, the demands of evidence from Ed Warner to Rashad Evans to Devin Cooper to Amber Kelsey's discussion. We will no longer wait for the community to respond to relinquish the privilege to engage in the authentic discussion, since large of the community seems to incapable of producing consensus for response to what we all agree is the blame, social inequality, this sense of the fact of the silence of the fall of Boys Club. Now let's be clear, the 2 and R cannot make a reformism good argument in the context of the 1 and R, because this is simply about heuristics, i.e. the way in which the debate game should be played. They have conceded the piece of Rodriguez 2010 evidence that makes an argument for the school to prison pipeline necessitates a revamping of society. We have to re-understand the way in which education is created inside of the status quo, which means that the affirmative is the only one that solves, because the negative is still stuck on the idea to perfect civil society, so on and so forth. They say that they read this democratic engagement argument, but arguments that we are necessary prerequisite. The affirmative is necessary.
Okay, why are the idea of like limits, I guess, in the way that the 1 and C discusses it, anti-black? I think you read this piece of Wilderson evidence in the
Frank Wilderson is saying that the limits placed on debates are always those that don't want to engage in questions about blackness or violence occurring to black people. This is indicative of your squad as a unit, you as debaters, and the larger PRL movement.
Okay, so you think the idea of limits is...
No, I think that the heuristic of debate that you are forwarding is one that is exclusionary, and that is relevant to your Anderson 6 evidence that's saying that there will always be an inevitable outsider to debate. We're saying that, yes, that outsider happened just to be black, just miraculously. Oh my God, this is benevolent.
How does the 1AC quote revamp society?
It's a question of how we then create knowledge production, right? The 1AC is demanding for the judges to realign the way in which we create epistemic frames to then create reformism. Instead of asking for police cameras, instead of asking to better civil society, we're then working towards a project that's bettering the people, black people, indigenous people, so on and so forth.
Near the top of the 2AC on K, they make an argument that, like, you know, police aren't necessarily a problem, but it's about folks being shot gratuitously, not because of
No.
Did I misunderstand
I think you're
you?
inflating 2 arguments.
No, yeah, you're right, actually. I'm going to rephrase that. You made an argument that folks are being shot gratuitously, not because of weed, not because of gambling.
Mhm.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, focusing on contingent problems
my question then is, how does the 1AC resolve those issues?
By problematizing the actual structure, beginning at the structure and then getting at the micro level. We can discuss how the criminal justice system, which is where Woods and I evidence is problematizing, and then have those discussions. But if we don't have if we don't begin the epistemic realignment, then obviously our policy making is bad. And a good example of this is the colorblind politicians who created the Voting Act. For example, LBJ, who promoted the Voting Act, but necessarily
is the next stance necessarily like colorblindness? Like,
it's not a question of whether or not the negative stance is one static problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that you encompass all of those problems. I don't think that you're demanding for a rethinking of the way in which we create reformism. You're just simply saying reformism is good. That's fine, but we're saying it's a priority question of how we then create those reforms.
We're good. This piece of Curry evidence near the top of the 2AC, quote, identifying with the oppressor is...
It's an ontological act.
Yeah. I know you know the quote, but my question then is, why is that necessarily true, or why is that...
Well, it's true to you. It's true. I mean, a good example of this is President Barack Obama. He's able to speak, but only insofar as it benefits the United States, right? He can only become an agent.
But why is that true of us in this debate?
Because you have devoided yourself from personal agency and said that the debate community needs this. Excuse me? This is why I know that. I think that your heuristics argument is that argument. You're saying that this is not about Northwestern in particular. Rather, this is about the whole debate community. We have to have deliberate democratic engagement, so on and so forth. That is divorcing your identity.
stuff.
I'm not saying
It's this building.
individual.
It's this building. It was like a closet almost.
It wasn't even as deep as this one. And so it was really only, it was kind of a wide game. Not very deep. There was nothing more really deep. It was really vast. That's the kind of core.
Yeah.
But there was still a big thing like that. It was just.
I had no one that's time. We used to call it the coffin. So you'd enter at one end and it's long all the way down the other end where you have to unleash. But you couldn't get out without like walking past like 12 rows of students. It was bad.
Means harness.
My lecture hall semesters are long.
Yeah. Were you teaching this semester? Which one happens?
It's weird. There's actually two sections.
Stop prep. Episode 438.
Yep.
So one of them was. So I teach, I mean, kind of like
How much you have left?
438.
cultural studies, rhetoric, basic concepts like
Yeah.
And we have 9 what?
All
I have
the
921.
context and.
Is highlighter good for dry erase boards?
Gotcha.
Nope, I don't know.
Alright, well, that is what it is. Did you? No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
Is
Is
it
it
bad?
tough if I go to the bathroom?
It might be.
I'm recording doing some criminal shit.
I need a judge here if I go pee if I go to the show.
Would you like a dry erase marker?
Yeah.
You just toss it.
Why you got a classroom in your book bag, man? You
You
can go
don't,
like
you don't
this.
get your own classroom when you're a university teacher.
Oh yeah, that is true.
And they don't, as you can see, they do not put dry erase markers in the classrooms.
Did you spin out the doc?
No, I'm about to.
Somebody have Advil or headache medicine sometime.
Half of pharmacy, very much.
Well, I mean, that's up to the debaters. Anybody want me taking Daryl's Vicodin before I make my decision? So, you've heard of is.
This is not on the live stream right now, is it?
Maybe. Maybe. Hi, Mom.
Okay if I use this?
Yeah, I do not have.
No.
Yeah.
You're fine.
I just sometimes people need cards from it, which makes it
No,
awkward.
I keep my
Yeah.
tabs on the side.
Yeah.
I think this is fine.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Y'all get the doc.
I haven't even checked.
Do you watch Broad City at all?
Oh, that's right.
Broad City's this Amy Poehler produced show that's on Comedy Central about two women who live in New York. And it's like they go over about real people instead of like fictitious white girls that might live in New York. And there's this whole episode where one of the characters ends up hanging out for the day with the woman who did Regis and Kathy Lee after Kathy Lee left.
Oh, okay.
Kelly Ripa. And Kelly's just like getting hammered, taking pharmaceutical drugs, is like, she's like, this is the coolest day ever. Kelly Ripa, I didn't know you were so awesome. She's like, it's my day off, it's Saturday.
Why did I download it?
Broad City's one of my favorite comedies right now.
Does it end up on Hulu Plus? It probably does.
I think so,
I'll
yeah.
have to look at that.
Don't think I gave an order. It's just gonna be tea.
Whole episode about hot part-time drummer, a quarter minute to the window.
Oh man, I am going to use this. you could call it a balance.
This one is ready in the morning.
It's 3 p.m. on these two.
This is normally a morning for you. Sunday.
Two good ass kids.
Okay. Anyone not good? Sweet. Debate again with about leaks provisional judgments on the quality of debating without casting final judgment on the systems themselves. The resolution exists now to final extent of legalization of criminality, or rather as a proposal to mature bounds clash very little of their offense applies against neither a policy being good argument nor a rules or jurisdiction claim nor an argument being able to change Congress. They should defend a topical plan of provisional incentives for the purpose of debating well prepared upon today. Cannot win offense vote negative to endorse all the normative content of the one seat because the floor, not a ceiling, of what they can advocate. Also proves reading the argument on the negative sauce or Roberts. We are ideologically violent. True impacts one educational testing resolution exists to ensure balance ground that's fair, and at least in the sense there are good arguments to both sides of the debate. We have the fact they have a better political starting point. It's not offense for them. It is the legalist. The change the topic cost, avoid tactical negatification, craft their advocacy, avoid the possibility of flaws, shoehorns the negative into the role of the technocratic villain, especially true when they're rolled about. It's just about having made a correct claim about the law because the applicant chooses an even more uncontroversial premise like law is historically perpetuated racism that is not contestable. Also means the arguments are presumptively false because they've not been sufficiently tested. The external impacts of political judgment and advocacy, Lumbergan and Cyber say deliberative on forces, resolution to specific targeted questions, generate time, cost assessment, argument development, info processing, identifying strength and weaknesses, listening to people you don't agree with, key to a capable century necessary to divert threats like neoliberal exploitation because combating fragmentation requires collective agreement on objectives engagement across difference. Any link turns the case because they'll be ineffective advocates for their cause. They wonder haven't rigorously defended this process through prerequisite their contact is impossible to achieve liberation through monologue. To his side balance is an impact in itself. Debate is a game of basis which necessitates anything gives the advantage should be a reason. They lose you wouldn't give the 2 minute head start in the race even if it took hours to run. That's easily enough to win. The margin of victory, a game in which it's easier for one side to win. It's reason enough to vote. Negative both sides are going after the ballot. Any other claims it means the others arguing in bad faith fundamentally denies respect for the negative starting engagement turns exclusion outweighs their offense there internally to resolve their impact space on a single debate is extremely marginal, but you are entirely in control of whether to lose to this half. Their framework creates a moral hazard to be up to run from the top of the name of non-falsifiable noble goals they do falsifiably got negative ground. Their counter-interpretation is totally arbitrary. They have no explanation of what the role is for beginning for what criminality means in terms of who wins the debate, which is all the one is across by deciding among it. Oh, the standard beyond just fragments that links to all Robbins because it doesn't provide predictable ground for the negative or guarantee that they have sufficient ground. No, it's more violent because of course the judge is to arbitrate which debaters' relationships to law are more true in some fundamental sense. Both teams have different structural relationships to legal violence. Say what one team is trans, the other black, and their experience is different radically. The judge has to decide who is right. Our framework is better because it recognizes decisions as always contingent and is limited to specific propositions about government action rather than the literally explicitly judging people's identities. The first argument is the sorry school, the prison argument about how we need to focus on our minds first. This kind of priority sequencing where relies on a false distinction is false, an overly rigid dichotomy between debate and the real world. Our ideas inside the debate are always conditioned by things like policies outside, which is evidence, which is the one and see evidence, which means that it is impossible to rigidly prioritize this, and focusing on policy is also necessary. Epistemological focus exclusively is bad. Our framework unless we're considering epistemological considerations and these policies, internalizing responsibilities, worse, rejecting political debates, focus on the individual responsibility, reduce the ultimate self-centered ethical reflection, no room for challenging systems, Chandler 13, having established the complexity questions, steps on fair regimes, that's important to kind of repetitive solution design and secretly change policy, how to consider how speech individuals might compensate the more responsibility spread, less interest areas in the environment themselves, and more attention there is to the ethical self-acceptance, critical and qualities, powers, and taste, and its environment, the need for ethical work, and self-once there's no separation between structure and individual social operates, and then level of self-reflexivity, democracy then becomes a matter of developing self-awareness, radical liberation, and form of decision-making, essential principle, planning, advances in their lifestyle, judgment, rather than holding government to account, the more we implicate these ethical reflexivity, less we can separate ourselves, subject, capable of acting politically, or ethically in the board, next argument is all of our evidence on the case also indicates that our kind of reformism can advocate, can be a path toward that kind of more radical rethinking. Violence is not gratuitous, still be more on that than one arbiter. We evidence in case that is fundamentally political. One example is how policing is primarily a political response to things like the Voting Rights Act, increasing the material power of black people, meaning that there was one white whites were trying to reduce it, which is not an example of come to grips with the piecemeal reform argument. Not all of them tend toward upholding it, which is their Crenshaw evidence indicated that can fundamentally challenge the legitimacy of those. The fact that they say policing is bad is a reason why the policy to end policing would be a radical challenge to that kind of violence. The the policing and debate argument is an answer to the affirmative, not exclusion. It's fundamentally responsive to their affirmative, which talks about the total ontological impossibility of engagement. Law talks about that we need to engage the resolution from a different standpoint. They have an explicit role about their way of engaging the resolution, which means they're logically saying we should engage the resolution in different ways. The most responsive argument we can possibly make. All arguments are framework arguments, exclusion arguments rely on a false dichotomy because debate requires continuous judgment of which arguments are persuasive and which can be dismissed, even if that usually happens implicitly. The role of the negative is to always to say that it was bad for the have to say what they did impact. The impact argument is wrong because we don't have the power to impose this normally to persuade you their arguments should be rejected, Anderson 6. Robbins tells us one argument in our own terms, one proves reason which is versus arguments that are probably sound both clear and persuaded, even argument in favor, argument is not the case, argument in favor, reason debate is versus power, and argument, imaginary argument is directly addressed what you argue for would be enforced, language doesn't imagine is enforceable, simply argument in favor of proceduralist frameworks have elevation mistakes, is simply the start of prevention, police, argument is trying to contact and gift radios, media, gravity, confront argument against status, equivalent what the importance of procedural in the book of discards articles, education, the nation of arguments, hard to see how procedural will be associated with when the administration is given a flagrant discard of democratic procedure, our goals, the democratic culture of argument is not served by counting appeals to identity, argument is junior, enhance the hard-handed reply, normative, exclusive, and not possible forms, and strategies of argumentation, and think with heat identification, bolted, solved by argument, systems, some single band of argument, the former entirely committed to let it not at all be, make decisions all the time of what love rises to cogency with the specific academic venues, what doesn't state there is implicit or regard to intended to judge whether this is making strong the case much, time is taken to judge the quality of all manner of effective performance about to test to do with norms, ceremonies, Robbins, they worry about their potentially coercive nature, they make this Walter argument, the T version is an answer to this which will be explained below, it just proves the impossibility of making their arguments within our version of the debate presupposes that they want a bunch of the theoretical arguments were contesting on the case, it's also disproven by them by being able to make persuasive arguments within debate and persuade people to communicate, which disproves the fundamental thesis of the Walter evidence voting act is not sufficient to solve because Wales is in, but the debate community itself is a kind of civil society which they are not sufficient to solve. We're not calling for sustaining institutions, which means this evidence doesn't apply because reformism itself can be a fundamental challenge to their sustainability. Though a topical version of the absolute their one sees the dissent argument is that they could argue against marijuana prohibition, for example, as one tactic in a broader critique of the school to prison pipeline that would allow for a study of criminality and material the ways in which it operates. It could be an instance of an abolitionist pedagogy culture being under prison through the incarceration. Most of the case hearts here are answers to the theoretical evidence. The theoretical arguments they're making, but advocating for legal change does not apply endorsing the state higher three. The line between reforms and abolitionist practice not dependent on the goal of the totification of the state is not to reject, must not prevent equation and need to struggle with the current life. We must have a lower vision to find the struggle with the present lockdown the system movement fails from taking struggles that out to those who work on the struggles of both must properly abolition movement work inside and outside the exclusion of people. We don't say the exclusion of people is inevitable. Obviously, people can inevitably be in debate, but all decision involves the same character of exclusion of particular arguments because you're inevitably privileging some over others in a decision that's inherent into the process of judging a debate. The SRB evidence doesn't lead to what's first because we don't characterize them as bad scholarship just as an argument about how they should lose this particular debate. The negative is always saying that the app is bad scholarship in some capacity, which is the Anderson argument about how adversarial contestation inevitably involves. That is not offense because we allow them to force people to research black thought, etc. even in our framework because the topical version it might not be exactly the same authors, but it's sufficient to solve limits are inherent to debate as well. The app, things like the affirmative inherently limited possible negative arguments, the argumentative exclusions are inevitable, which is argument because some ones will be judged irrelevant regardless, but that does not make any particular exclusion, any particular exclusion of people inevitable there. It's the reason why we can't make any particular argument of climate axiomatic, which is the reason why their inevitable exclusion arguments don't apply to liberation. It's not inevitable exclusion or evidence, inevitable exclusion or Anderson evidence directly answers there since we can it's possible to incorporate things like different modes of reasoning, etc., which means that it is not there's no inherent exclusion within deliberation because it's possible to incorporate different modes of reasoning while still recognizing that reason and judgment of the relative credibility of claims is necessary as a process of coming to agreement. The New Deal argument is about electoral democracy, so it obviously can't be a disproof of the fact that at a micro level it's possible to deliberate among individuals and come to agreement. Our argument is not imposing a boys club versus the top version is an answer because it proves that different people would be able to engage effectively in the space. Second, said voting affirmative, voting against framework is not sufficient to solve this because there are evidence to talk about structural conditions and interpersonal conditions outside of simply the debate context, which means this is not primarily a question of argumentative selection, but things that cannot be resolved simply by forcing us to go for different arguments. Reformism good is a net benefit to our framework insofar as our interpretation causes us to debate those issues more. The whole evidence is internally because it says that it says through debates over these issues we can develop a better understanding to make us better advocates for things like legal change that answer those arguments. The school to prison pipeline is in part constituted by policy, which is going to be an argument in the one hour because it's constituted by things like the degree to which we shape our prisons, the degree to which we have criminal laws that impose people, the degree to which we structure our schools, etc., which means that policies can play a part in changing our minds in the first place. Reform does not tend toward perfecting civil society inevitably, but it can be involved in a radical critique or consistent with a radical critique of the society, which is behind our evidence. We can critique and change our mind within our framework, which is all the topical version arguments. The responsibility arguments our backward dodging culpability requires ignorance of how the law produces oppression because privilege, once implicitly understand it, is doing your will, advocating against legal violence forces a confrontation with our complicity in oppression. Codes 14. Abuses are rapid, it's bad, and democratic role. The problem is that we are majoritarian states, so police brutalize people are forgiven because ultimately we're really just forgiving ourselves power to couple responsibilities. One, we seek to look away from violence. Some beliefs because police are not treated as violence. We are the criminal justice system. It's the most consistent tool for making American will manifest in black communities. We would like to know little about criminal justice system is possible, but now through merciless lethal violence and escape right has been revealed the deliberate critiques of deliberative exclusion are wrong, collaborative. The idea of the comedic rationality excludes affective discourse, the narrow reading public narrative, make from graphic discourse, to clearly but not be extrapolated from rational mitigation requirements. As exclusion, reflexivity, impartiality, reason, connotation claims do not exclude affective dimensions of interaction. The impartiality indicates an ethic fairness rather than disembodied judgment. Impartiality is complementary, respectful listening to the further links, cognitive, affective aspects of interaction. The reciprocal connotation claims is not the between to dispatch of the interrogation.
You didn't read the code's evidence, right?
No, I did. That was the one just before this, and then I jumped back to Dolver.
Okay.
How's your heuristic for debate any different than the status quo's interpretation of how we should debate?
Well, we have arguments about how it includes within it the potential for things like more radical approaches to reform, which we think, for
How is
example,
that different
marijuana.
than your affirmative that you read at Wake Forest?
Well, we obviously think that our affirmative is a pretty good one, so I don't know
So
whether
isn't
that's
this,
material
so
or
isn't
not.
it to say that the heuristics of debate that you're forwarding the same one as the status quo norm for how we should debate?
No, we think that that sort of debate about those kinds of arguments tends toward creating change. That sort of tends toward creating change that
Okay,
makes
what's
debate better over time.
what's the purpose of this change? Is it towards like to like, I don't know, make equality, make the world a more prosperous place? What's the purpose of this change?
Part of the arguments in favor of it will be on the case. So those are the arguments about how we're a better approach to resolving things like racial oppression, anti-blackness. But
Okay,
we also
so
think
towards
there's other
equality.
things like
What's a topical
deliberation that we're
version
better for
of
resolving.
what's a topical version of the affirmative?
So one of them we said would be advocating against marijuana prohibition as part of a critique of the school to prison pipeline, and we think that would allow for sort of studying criminality. The other things the 1AC says are good without
What's the
obviating
net
the
benefit
opposite
of that
about it.
opposed to the 1AC? I don't
Well,
understand how the
both
1AC
that it would allow for the
proposes
kind
that.
of deliberative engagement that we say is good, which is sort of our arguments at the top about how you
Deliberate
include that.
engagement, doesn't deliberate engagement imply that we're all subjects of the law? How exactly is a criminal at Rikers
Deliberative
Island?
engagement
Excuse me, I'm
is-
sorry, I didn't ask my
okay.
question. How exactly is a criminal in Rikers Islands, the disproportionate number of criminals in Rikers Islands, subjects of democracy?
Well, the legal status is sort of beside the point for
How is it-
deliberative democracy in debate, which is not electoral
Wait, deliberate
democracy.
democracy
It's about
in debate.
engaging
What do you mean
with
by
people in
deliberate
discourse.
democracy in debate? Are you saying that all black debaters have an equal say in how debate is planned out?
Obviously not, but our Anderson evidence and some of our other evidence theorizing deliberation acknowledges that those sorts of inequalities in deliberation are inevitable, but it is
So if
possible
they're
to account
inevitable,
for
why
them.
shouldn't we create a stretch on the limits of debate? Why shouldn't we redefine the heuristic?
Well,
of
no,
debate?
no, no. Those, not that they're inevitable only to this particular structure.
I didn't
but
ask you whether or not it's
insofar- No, but that's sort of the premise of yours is like we should do something different. My argument is that those obviously exist now, but we can go toward remedying them within the structure of deliberation.
So yeah, sure, that might be true, but why is it not? Why does this negate the fact that we can also try something different?
Well, we have various offensive arguments for why the deliberative frame, a legal frame, are useful and productive for
yeah,
politics.
but your legal frame is towards bettering the police force, correct?
No,
So it's
no,
not-
it is not about making the police force better or stronger. It is toward the end of ending racialized oppression and other forms of oppression.
How exactly do
domination,
you?
et cetera.
What reform do you propose as per the 1NC that remedies discrimination?
Well, the one topical version is one
No,
example.
that's
obviously.
not something that you advocate for. That's an example about which we
Well,
should.
to some extent it is.
Can I missed one question. Can I ask you 20 seconds on the clock?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Let me just think about it. Is the argument that we did something wrong or that we didn't do so? Is it about what we did or how we did it?
Well, the argument is that in order to win, you would have had to argue for topical action.
Is it like plain text?
It's that you have to say that the U.S. should legalize.
Okay. 17 seconds.
Yeah. I'm emailing this out. It's
Are you tracking it on the?
Yeah, it's right.
Okay,
Great.
yeah, he's got it.
Excellent.
I'm just emailing the speech. It's the case.
No, it was 17 seconds, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I subtracted 7 seconds from this. Hey, but my math is on point though, because I did that in a second.
14.
I know I answered the question wrong, but I jumped to the wrong answer pretty quick.
One of the two digits was correct.
Right.
50%.
Let's be optimistic, huh?
In most of my classes, that's a D.
What's the time?
You laugh.
For me, that's a B plus.
Yeah. I couldn't find where I saved it. Give me a second. Yep, there you go. Okay, it's in space. I don't know, I have to delay
mean it's
things,
on
so
the
like,
way, right?
yeah, it's on the way. It's going up to the satellite and shit.
Is Miles just trolling with this app?
What happened?
I don't know.
Bitcoin app?
The Bitcoin.
Is he really?
Gambling legitimizes Bitcoin as key to solve remittances to Somalia? Solves Peruvian growth? I mean,
Why don't people read that shit?
Does anyone who needs it up have it up?
Hold it.
You got it? Yeah?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, no, it's all chill.
Where you go?
Case.
What's your favorite Outkast song?
Song, it's a tie between The Art of Storytelling and Crumbling Herb.
See the tie between the storytelling and Miss Jackson.
Okay.
I'm good. Thank you.
You good? Alright, cool.
Pragmatic legalization policy is possible and preferable. Trend lines are shifting, and the status quo legislatures are prepared to engage debates of legalization of liberalization of criminal justice, but it's a question of how we approach those questions. Pragmatic strategies for facilitating further change are crucial to bridging the empathy gap and causing real change. Their evidence speaks to theory and the abstract, but only cites recent statistics regarding the incarceration rate and racial disparities and criminalization. That's our cold evidence. Also, they say pragmatism fails because equality is an illusion, but policy has potential to disrupt status quo structures, because drug law policy is key area of decarcerative work that's crucial to accomplishing prison abolition. Sudbury and anti-incarceration advocacy is an important component of racial prison and the radical anti-prison agenda, ultimately not to create more humane prison, but to dismantle gun drug law reform is a key area of decarcerative work. The campaign combines racial justice, economic, and public safety arguments by demonstrating that the law have created a pipeline of prisoners so called to be. The campaign calls for an anti-mandatory minimum reinstatement sentencing, discretion reduction of the sentence length, and expansion of alternatives. Former drug war prisoners play leadership role in decarcerative efforts in the field of drug policy reform. Decarcerative work is not limited to law reform, theorizing the intersection of racialized violence and gender interpersonal violence, laying the groundwork for a broader abolition of gender refuse legitimacy of incarceration in response to deep-rooted social inequality face on the lack of systems of repression. Activists have viewed campaigns for decarceration as building blocks towards the ultimate goal of abolition. Practical actions promises success that are essential marks on the road to long-term transformation. Prisoners challenge the state's legitimacy by confronting the brute force of state power by helping term abolition deliberate links between dismantling and prison's abolition of slavery, the abolition, find the abolition of the prison's logical completion of unfinished liberation. Mark right 13 which regulated rather than ended slavery, and also especially in the context of their school to prison pipeline arguments has been addressed by confronting policies that perpetuated came in all 2010 problems associated with the school to prison pipeline are not intractable. The first step, take a critical look at existing policies. Policies are counterproductive. It will be necessary to address head on the crisis and enactment and debates over marijuana legalization in this advocacy community. Engagement with the logic of decriminalization and mass incarceration. Technical discourse is key to reframing the debate over now 10 and 14 legalization. Marijuana is an alternative to draconian laws to drop of the war structure regime that passed through decades. Marijuana position to say constitutes 10 drug later less so by 2007 more than 7 million Americans are behind bars. The government increases penal for drug users or plus racial fears and terror times. Direct my symbolic team minutes away middle class rights war structures spreading harm minority citizens their person to continue deeping qualities in education health care equal opportunities and advance equality individual life. The community supposed to fulfill the serious struggle. Partisan understanding for the reforms of matter of justice supporting the equal section of economic frontiers and larger problems of mass incarceration for also against the laws and political power for the matter of decommunism. There's right for capitalism collaboration mass incarceration effectively started to cause state concepts of rise on after the African American people in marijuana debate needs to be remove all penalties against uses rights and try reform is the only path. Next, read this piece of Curry evidence, but our crunch evidence answers all points says that we do not have to identify with the state, but rather using institutional logic can be a strategic way to weaken it and using it to your own answer. Curry evidence also false false relationship between using the state and having an deeply ontological relationship with it. And I'll finish Crenshaw here because it's convenient. The central issue is to avoid legitimate effects of reform. If engaging in reforms discourse in an effective way to challenge legitimacy of social order efforts to change an oppressive situation, but if the adopt a dominant discourse to some degree, taking from part of successful efforts that change in this method of politics is better for radical change. So God in 2019, let's try to protect their peaceful for the critique of reforms, imperialistic or one critique tells better how she interpret events affecting them, a court order directing how authority disperse funds for heating and housing may postpone the resolution, or it may not. In the meantime, the order keeps families warm in, particular so the possibility of revolution later on. We see incremental change changes may bring revolutionary changes close or not. On reforms and discomplacency, some let be appetite for further combat critique of reform. Also, Mississippi possibility next Curry's critique essentializes black theories outlawed in 2011, which we're seeing develop the challenge work hard to sort for black folks all here, surely including some provide critical for the they think so no account software there. Is evidence African Americans that are per great quarter Curry after zone of what African centerpiece in the center. The idea of deciding the score while writing a black vote will be constituted how much it is whole we do not want Curry. Rice is all what takes nation but black. People found I wanted to how reading diagnosis my ass creates themselves from a curl. The crisis in the absence of solid acceptable guide the extension side diagnosis to abstract his critique. Africa cries out for empirical of linear rights about the soul sorting effects of black students how accurate is current critique is turns to epistemic certainty arguments at the top of the choice seafood when he says that centralized by black theory now they say standpoint epistemology is key but it's too sweeping. A dominant standpoint can emancipate an oppressed standpoint can return suffering del plateau. It doesn't critical conscience for the oppressed and critical theory should lead to a mismatch however critical theory starts to the third words but the oppressive improve the conditions of the oppressive world critical theory centers describe the oppressive points to change critical theory can fulfill is functional about being convincing it can be liberating force we can provide a better objective explanation but power relation the idea is not to please the oppressed because the support of the world the critical thinker might have to contribute Spanish for if I dominate Aristotle express that he or she wants to help that should become so as irritation he or she exercises critique not only against the defenders as but also within his or her household and anti-blackness is not an ontological condition or engraved and installed. The social doesn't have to be divided in such dark terms. Our identities are contingently constructed. Sorry. Tuisi says that it's social, but that means policy is able to change it because policy and these social are mutually constituted. As moving 13, anti-black racism, creation of policy choices, and impossible defense that using public policy risk and creating policy really destroyed by policy, nothing about natural black, white, or white, they define history, white, human, how can black Africans wore the slave trade without black race, and took really short to make black, stigma by something African intentions, first, and their white counterparts, and change report would really come to let it become the process would make white historically logic, ideology of American slavery, was built to reflect race so much, was built in tandem with it, but the black people from when it comes to force to resign current on monarchies use of some nine ownership under the view that they're unfit for self-created prohibition preventing a more sexual from engagement but for the adverse consequences society can create stigma by using a lot of force particular kinds of behavior other species of false evidence in the bottom of the case of it but it's not intrinsic to their model debate this is probably across not cross but probably intuitive but a rewrite piece of the lumber gaps in case that deliberate debate models are able to resolve existential tests which include things like racial gender and class. Injustice in the concept of social death is a theoretical abstraction that denies the agency is overly reductionist and based on an incomplete historical understanding around chills under the concept of social theoretical abstraction and meant to describe lived experience and say so much to reduce them to at least competent as competence what Cooper's content say agentless abstraction is a little limited the experience of enslavement of one race social death and I can regard to the liberal purchase for contemporary scholarship the extreme nature of institution actually encourages the pessimism the capacity of collective agency among subjugated people market subjugated people there's no impact to the years here Eurocentrism argument in that Eurocentrism argument to it's also answered by French authors could you not identify with this thing? Brown is marked at agency among subjugated people. Cool?
Iowa, are you going to take a few minutes or do you quick?
A few minutes.
Okay.
You want me to read the card for the card? You want me to read the card for the card?
Maybe it's about no card that answers currently. This is not response to quality of current. Argument of current about equality within the field. Prosperity, contemporary, their response to current is about his description of the philosophy department's activity university collateral before it's talking about black PhD students. No, it's just I read about it. Social justice doesn't make sense.
What do you want to confirm? What do you want me to say this time?
Frame of the debate. All English and Canadian is better than theirs. Or just begin with something better. Korea is outside of commercial innovation. Democratic innovation is outside of limits. The post limited yet conceded the resistant base relevance of this old boys club. Sutra writings have this reading of gardens.
No, these are just not Mark software is just reading. Okay? Go, I'm listening to you. Is there anything else you want me to say? You want me to cut? What card from when I see it?
Appointment. 56.
356. Case. And then, oh, none of them are here. None of them. Awesome. I'm filling water.
Why did you just reduce our prep?
Oh, I put the same one, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's funny. But I don't like you, I don't even know. That's why I put that. Yup, highlighters are bad for, oops, I'm sorry, Iowa.
I think being able to like scribble on it with that marker and erase might be a thing.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not
what I was
sure.
trying, that's what I was thinking.
Good work.
Just a little bit,
I put a little elbow grease in it.
right? Since we're not doing much right now. So how's your flight over here?
We drove.
Y'all drove
Yeah.
from Chicago?
Yeah, it's like a 4-hour drive, I think, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So it wasn't bad.
It's like a 2-hour plane ride. No, an hour plane drive actually. Plane drive, that's weird. The fuck am I saying?
Could technically drive the plane here, I guess.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't conduct the plane.
So just living at, are y'all staying at y'all's places?
I wish, man. But I know that I wouldn't wake up.
Oh, so you're all at the hotel?
Yep. They know better than to put me in the. I've been in a party yesterday, the day before that, today right now. I'm joking.
Pre-Easter parties?
I didn't even know it was Easter. I still don't know what the fuck Easter is. I just know there's a rabbit involved.
That's basically all of it.
Ain't that all you gotta know, right? Wonder, so last debate, we had to debate Jesus, and he read some of your cards from Tropicalization. Dude, you got fucked up, guilty, but you're by association. It was a 2-1, but There we go. End it up.
Yeah, I haven't seen him yet. I've only seen Lenny.
Yeah, right. You got knocked down in the bracket, huh?
I think he's the first one of all y'all New Yorkers who emailed me.
No, Charles.
I think Charles was second. Maybe Charles was
But
first.
there was only one who came to these fucking cornfields. So, sort of winning.
Is that a win or a loss for me?
You so
Which
phony.
Which is it?
You so phony.
You
I'm gonna remember that when you asked me to dog sit.
Oh, that sucks.
Too expensive. Too many other conferences too. I just got
Yeah.
back from a small conference outside of Philly, in Villanova.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I did, and this was my Puerto Rican studies year too. So
Unless you're doing ICA.
no, but the Puerto Rican Studies conference was in October, so I had that, NCA,
Yeah.
and this colonialism conference, and that together is just like
I can only
way
go to
over
2
my
a year, basically, and Chicago was really expensive this year.
Chicago was really expensive. Philly was expensive.
All right. I'm gonna do the case flow and do the critique flow.
Eggs and some cheese, so it was damn well.
I put down 0, expected it 8. My whole standards were low.
Case for me.
All right. We good? I don't know why to stop. All right. That was all right. All right. The what's evidence is how you should be viewing the case debated already makes the claim that the criminal justice that was the point across the 1AC where he had the line that talks about conventional narrow understandings of the criminal justice system portraying implicit faith in the system capacity to be reformed and ignorance to the way when state violence and white supremacy are two sides of these stakeholder jaws in historical analysis. They have misread the affirmative. It's not just a question of us being a historicity of the reason why the law is bad. It's the question of it not being able to be redressed by legal reform. They said that pragmatic legal reform is possible and is preferable. The entirety of the 1AC in office against this claim are Hartman evidence talks about how these slaves will inevitably be rendered illegitimate in civil society. Our sex evidence goes a little bit further. It talks about how things like the prison industrial complex are the afterlife of slavery and make it so the black population is still available on a massive scale for imprisonment. Now this is implicit in your performance of the 1AC speech act, which is a policing strategy. That's why I asked in the crosses of the 1AC, why not just have a criticism of our ontology and say that state action could be preferable at the counter advocacy rather than have a policing mechanism, rather than engage within our strategy. They have chose to ignore this hit drug policy and preferable things like drug policy preferable because it solved the prison industrial complex. No, it is not. Retroactiveness is not even released in the United States. You should maybe do some government. You should do some research. U.S. is one of like 6 countries that doesn't guarantee retroactive release. They say that school to prison pipeline can be solved in their interpretation. They can see the Rodriguez evidence talks about the school to prison pipeline not just in the outside world, but it's a question of prisons being everywhere. Prison of our mind. That's why jail starts at 2AC. I think we need to have an epistemic disruption. They say the reform has been good. The Curry evidence draw the fourth distinction, but they're in to Curry and the concept of the SIU department philosophy department not equality, which our evidence is making the claim that it builds off the idea of things like white ethics, which is necessarily implicit in their idea that someone will never be school and just coincidentally in the black students. So they say that the world is in contingent structure. It's contingently structured with mean policy can solve. That is a fallacy. Even if they win the contingency debate, they do not have any empirical example when the law has redressed the structure, the contingency, even the contingent structure of anti-black violence. That's why I gave the example of how things like the Voting Rights Act did not redress or make any better, make things better for people in a lot of parts of America. They say that performance debate or the benefits out of a performance debate that Polson highlights is not in our method of debate. Yes, it is, because it specifically talks about why we need to be focusing on the theory. We are literally stuck in academia. We should not be focusing on the policy out there. We should be focusing on disrupting the prisons within our mind, within the states. It talks about how the LBS founders did that and were able to do things like close down a youth prison in Baltimore. What does their type of debate do? They make a in a very blippy argument and the impact to Eurocentrism and the entirety of the 1ACU lead to the exclusion of black debaters within this space, and also the extermination of them in the law. That's Rodriguez 7 evidence talks about you naturalized genocide. Go to the framework. They say the debate is a game, but we're winning the counter-interpretation at the beginning, and the sight of the criminal is necessary for how we should be engaging within the game. In the context of this year's resolution, they say that our counter-interpretation doesn't solve all their own. Yes, it does, because we are necessarily arguing that we should not just say that one type of debate is preferable over the other, rather that these type of strategy can coexist. I.e., when Gio asked in the cross of the two and see, why don't you just read your app on the negative and say that's preferable to the affirmative, rather than have a policing strategy. All of your performative element of policing leads to all of the current information that shouldn't have to beat a dead dog. They say that our counter-interpretation is really bad. It makes it, and all of our arguments still makes it just, I answered that above. They said that we may, they say we said the policy is bad, but that's not a reason why policy can't solve. They aren't trying to police us. Yes, you are a question of policing us. You had the possibility to have a case against our ID or certain evidence is often gets a Greek that talks about how there is a literature base of which you can research things like black optimism, black feminism, or queerness. You can read so much shit against our ad because it's not person. That's the beauty of it. We should be disrupting the prisons within our mind because we don't know all of the flaw within the affirmative. Rather than reading your framework as a policing strategy, you can have a counter method in which we can debate and debate and deliberate upon. They say they have also not properly answered the resistance debate 12 evidence talking about what does your heuristic look like. What other model of debate have produced black and Latino and Native American debaters in math to be required in this activity? What does their world look like? What does equality look like? What does Switch Side debate look like? Does Switch Side debate and all their standards and voter reasons why you should be endorsing the framework look like debate in 1954 when it was only people that look like you judging in the back debate. Also, up here, I would not be here if their model of debate was the only one that we allowed to be here. They say that voting asked me that we were able to persuade, which disrupt all the Waterston arguments had, and not in Austin's arguments. Waterston doesn't say that niggas can't do shit good, like niggas can't play basketball and win awards. Rather, it's a question of how we disrupt the prison within this space and discuss that. It's about how we discuss the prison within this space and carry that out in the real world. The topic of controversy of the affirmative literally makes no sense. Advocating against things like legalizing marijuana does not advocating for legalization of marijuana would never solve any part of the affirmative. It's literally 9 minutes of saying why the law will inevitably see us as criminal. Even if we allow for things like marijuana to be legalized, it would just be used as an excuse and alibi to allow for the slave body, i.e. the blackened body, to be continued to be persecuted. An example of this would be, like, marijuana is illegal, but now you get to get police and stop because you are high in a public nuisance.
4:38, starting. You keep doing it on Zoom. Come. Do you want me to keep doing it? Okay.
Abuela, estoy debatiendo, lo vengan ahorita. La bendición. My grandmama said hi.
Oh, did you just put that there? I was just a little confused. I don't,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
was-
actually need to move this. I don't know why I did. I just.
Is that code for answer something on case? Watch out.
Yes.
That would be pretty clever. That's a good idea,
You
but
see
we
what
haven't
you-
done that yet.
Look at that. They're still communicating with one another. Stop tapping your foot. I'm joking.
Yeah.
As debate proves time and time again, communication does not always equal argumentation. I don't think I heard an argument that Georgia State made in this debate yesterday that I would have ever voted for.
Damn.
They read the God counter.
We got that sound off, right?
The guy
It was like, I can see a world where I vote on this exclude utility counterplay. I was like, don't lie, DJ. There's no world you're ever voting for this counterplay.
Anyone not good?
order.
Oh yeah, I guess you need that. T case.
Give me a second.
Anyone not good? Great. The neo-Limbic package deliberation is dropped, which means that they cannot win. The skill of debating a well-prepared opponent is necessary to learn to do things like engage across fundamental differences and not see arguments as axiomatic so that you can come to continued agreements about policies and about policies and plans of action to resist against neoliberals. And they cannot turn this because it's not fundamentally based on the kind of coercive power their anti-blackness evidence is talking about, but rather on the indifference of the market, which is something that we've only explained why deliberation is able to access, which first means that there's a mass suffering disadvantage to the affirmative. The only framework that's able to solve. Second is the presumption impact. This is not resolved. Answer their framework interpretation needs the negative is not in a position to adequately test the app, even if it's debatable in the abstract. It's not in practice, and this round because they have too much discretion to avoid all flaws, because there are too many unpredictable advocacies to simply discourse criminality. This means that you can't not have confidence in their case arguments or solvency because their mechanism has not been tested sufficiently, even if it's not sufficient to vote negative on presumption. It hedges against all their case solvency claims and their theory arguments as well. The couple of link arguments to this that are not answered. First is the moral hazard argument to their counter-interpretation, because simply starting from criminality allows the affirmative to craft their advocacy to avoid any possibility of being flawed, puts the negative in the impossible position of the technocratic villain who just has to try to pick out a flaw when the app is total discretion, which makes them not have to answer the best possible version of their argument. Second is no criteria for deciding under their counter-interpretation, because there's no way of deciding among positions when their only guidance for the judges to begin from the site of criminality. There was no explanation to this in 1AR, which means that that's not sufficient for this counter-interpretation to be viable. Individualization link as well. They have not answered the evidence we read to answer their mindset arguments that indicate that focusing exclusively on one's mind, i.e. the prison in your mind, means that there's no possibility of changing macro-level legal structures, which feeds into neoliberal individualism, because we can't address that kind of collectivity that's necessary. Their next argument is that reading or the app on negative is sufficient to solve that. Destroys the possibility of negative preparation, because destroys the possibility of negative preparation because we would have to write every affirmative because they choose any part of the topic. It also means we would lose on the firm. They have no explanation why this would be considered competitive, because they could just say that we do this and they do that. If this argument is true, they also lose on the argument that we made that they dropped, that they can simply read this argument on the negative, which solves their arguments about how it's necessary to change the beta set with no possibility of policing, because they consider the Anderson evidence as an overarching claim that all all arguments in debate are inherently framework arguments. Things like the Capke, etc., would all say that their scholarship was dangerous and should be rejected. All of them say that their academic authors, etc., are bad. All of them call for a privileging of particular kinds of arguments over theirs. They cannot draw a meaningful distinction between the means in which framework excludes certain arguments from the debate and the means in which other kinds of arguments we might otherwise have gone for, which means there's no unique link to the exclusion argument. We are a case next to their affirmative, not leasing. This was all the arguments about how the core of their argument is a role of the ballot argument about how we should relate to the resolution which we are directly criticizing. We are an argument about how there's a different approach to the resolution which should be more productive. We are critique on case with it. That is a net benefit to our framework argument in our role of the ballot, which is the the greatest degree of engagement possible against an act that is set up like there is the prison in mind. They've considered that it is co-constituted with the material prison, which is the buoy, and it's about how law contributes to the construction of racism in the first place, which means that there is no possible. They've also considered the arguments about how there cannot be a sharp division between debate and the outside world, because these shape are because the mindset we take into debate is constituted by the policies outside of it, which means that which means it's impossible to start with the prison in the mind without external to also focusing on things like changing the policies that create that prison in the mind in the first place. This is another example of them engaging in neoliberal atomization that means that says we only need to focus on ourselves and changing our mind, and we're ignoring the material structures that constrain the possibilities for that. We do not exclude, because of the topical version of the F, our vision of debate includes lots of possible social locations. The kind of deliberation we advocate for includes the possibility of affective argument, recognizing different modes of rationality, etc., which is all the Dahlberg evidence they haven't answered. Everyone could potentially be here because the topical version of the F would allow for things like radical reformism behind a remnant syndicates. You don't have to actually endorse the federal government's existence, because you can advocate for abolition alongside reformism to resolve material conditions in the interim, which answers their main link to the violence argument, the main link to the violence argument. We turn these arguments about prisons, etc., because the best way to solve them is through legal reforms, and the topical version is better. They could advocate for marijuana legalization, which alone, yes, would not solve everything, but we've read evidence that indicates that kind of drug-based decarceration act, the caution and the broader critique of criminality, which is the sudbury evidence on case that they did not answer particularly well. Go to case now. The main argument they have to win here is that anti-blackness is not ontological or a structural condition. There's a few arguments here. First is history, or only evidence agrees that some reversals have occurred, but the idea that racial dominance has been unchanging throughout U.S. history ignores real changes that have occurred. Their evidence is overly pessimistic. We agree that these victories were partial or incomplete, but to dismiss them as continuation of the status quo is factually incorrect. These reforms had the facts that reverberate throughout civil society movements, may experience setbacks, but there has been progress. The issues they started, most of the ones of policy, not inherent to civil society. That's only reform is possible because law and society are mutually constituted, which explain how the other flows. There's nothing natural about the black-white divide. Always determined by policy choice. An example of this is when blacks folks are denied access to home ownership due to racist government policies that force folks to live in crowded and poor areas. Also, the argument about how they eliminating the police would be a response to these arguments. The ontological arguments are it's an evidence directly response to those says that they are theoretically bankrupt, and it's rather an ontic condition that is contingent rather than the one they're talking about. Violence is not gratuitous, but rather political, which is an argument on framework. They didn't answer the argument about how white violence during the civil rights movement was a response to black enfranchisement that was supposed to reflect to suppress the vote, which both proves that was effective at making meaningful change, and that violence can fundamentally be resolved through that kind of contingent changes. We do not place faith in the criminal justice system. We agree that it is white supremacy and the status quo's question of how best to fight the French tribe syndicates to tactically deploying the language of law against itself. The best way to weaken it and undermine its legitimacy, not reforms is the best way. The theory arguments about the afterlife of slavery rely on them winning empirical arguments because they substantiate them through historical arguments that we are answered above with the only evidence. He is engagement, which is explained on the other flow. They rolled about, and we have a counter rolled about, which is the best way to engage in prison. Of the mind and material prison are mutually constitutive, which means that one way of addressing the prison of the mind is through addressing the prison system writ large, because that is part of what constitutes it. The Curry indicted in the case that he'd homogenized black folks in their interests, which is a direct answer to their argument, because it directly contests the idea that there is some fundamental antagonism that makes it impossible to engage the state. The empirical examples are evidence indicates that even if the Voting Rights Act did not enormously reduce things, that what's the vision of the polls and evidence is not intrinsic. They have no explanation. Their evidence about LBS advocating for legal reform, which proves that he version our evidence indicates that we are more necessary. No explanation to link to Eurocentrism begs the question of the theory.
Where's 356?
Let me know when you're on framework. nuisance. Section 8 housing. Get down. Section 8 housing. Get down. What's your even estimate? That's like even if you're wrong. Blackness is contingent. They don't disrupt the structure of the prison in a
Case K. I mean case T. Can I go get a drop of water real quick? Thank you.
nice crew neck.
Excuse me?
I really like your crew neck.
Where?
Yeah.
I copped it yesterday.
Oh, that's really nice.
Are there actually more for purchase? Like,
Yeah, they are. They're in the IMU 25.
Alright.
If we win epistemology, proceeds politics, then we win this debate because it structures the way in which we engage with the material world. They have conceded the piece of Rodriguez evidence at the bottom of the one. You see that indicates that the piecemeal reforms in the status quo is already problematic because they don't understand the microcosm of the problem or the specificity of the situation. That is posted by the Woods was a non-evidence that makes an argument for why the criminal justice system is creating that creates an anti-black matrix that puts the black as the archetype of the criminal justice system or the criminal. This is the necessity of having the one AC of voting affirmative. The ballot represents a shift in the ontological and of the epistemic understanding of how we relate to the criminal justice system. It's not a question of whether or not police brutality is a problem, but rather an understanding that the police itself is parasitic against black folks. It's not a question about whether or not marijuana is the problem. Rather, it's understanding that because you are black and smoking weed, there is a disproportionately chance that you will get stopped and frisked and touched and grabbed and bullied. You will get an excess of violence. The Hudson evidence is not a question of this debate because we have conceded already that even if violence is not ontological, social paradigm is already created under the pretext of anti-black. That is the strategic concession of the Rodriguez 2007 evidence that makes an argument for why the conditions of the criminal justice system stem out of the creation of the plantation system, which means that this mitigates all of their piece of reformism arguments or their only evidence about white supremacy and the foundational history of it. They've considered the piece of Rodriguez evidence that also mitigates all of their arguments for why we have to begin at the prisons of the material condition, because the piece of Rodriguez evidence is better than their Kim et al. Evidence. Their Kim et al. Evidence is only indicative of the ways in which policies inside of the status quo and the school to prison pipeline are fucked up. This is only descriptive of what Rodriguez is already saying. The Rodriguez evidence is better because it concludes that we have to begin at the site of the school, because it's where we deputize our professors, our mentors, or the people that are in the status quo of the Bay, i.e. North, Western OW. You have the unique opportunity to reject two police officers, and you should take that. They say that Paulson is a T-bird. They say that Paulson is the warrior under their T-version of the planet, but you have conceded that LB as is an example of epistemic meditations inside of the debate community, then created political change, which only means that there is no way that the affirmative cannot lead to the framework of the negative. Rather, we are a supplement to their form of framework. This is exactly what Brooke is saying, that our framework can coexist inside of this debate space. That is a concession. The positive evidence is bolstered by the Hartman evidence that makes an argument for why we're already outside of the articulation of the criminal justice system, outside of the articulation of the legal system, outside of the definition of what it means to have democratic deliberation, which means that we have to have a discussion of what it means to be human. What does it mean to be subject of the law? What does it mean to have a political practice? If you haven't had a priority question of the ways in which we should engage, the case alone should be a add to the framework. Let's go on the framework argument. The first thing on top is that you have to extend our counter-interpretation to engage in a priority question of the criminal side of the criminal of the underside of the legal system, which is criminality. There are a few net benefits. First is the school to prison pipeline. Rodriguez evidence that we have already boasted. The terminal impact of this is the colonization of our mind. They have conceded that all reformism will flow, which means that there is an internal link to all of their solvency mechanism. And on the case debate, the second net benefit is the argument that we have to have a genealogical understanding of genealogical understanding to the debate space. That's the Rodriguez, the last Rodriguez evidence to go to city. The third net benefit is the piece of resistance debate 2012 evidence that makes the descriptive claim that Anderson is going for. That Anderson is saying that there will always be exclusion of the debate space. The resistance debate 12 evidence gives it the moisture and says that yes, the exclusion will always be the black debaters inside of the debate community, because the threat of the wrong form has always been pushed against Devin Cooper, Rashad Evans, Amber Kelsey, and other black debaters who are trying to engage in the question of the norms and rules of debate. The terminal impact is exclusion, which means that you have to reject their policing apparatus. They say that this is not a unique form of policing apparatus, because every other off-case position makes a framing question, but it's not necessarily a question of framing, rather about how you problematize our arguments. You have made an argument for why there should be limits on the game of debate, but the problem is that those limits is always trying to stop us and drown us, which is the argument. I'll clean up the flow. They say that the first thing that we link to is their moral hazard argument, but they conceded that it is not impossible to engage. It's rather you have made the strategic choice. That is the Dr. Shanera Brinkley evidence that makes an argument that you have to shut up and stop talking about framework, because you are only attempting to regurgitate evidence instead of reproduce new knowledge production. They make an argument for why there is no criteria or credential to how we engage inside of the counter-interpretation, but this is false. They have conceded that it's a question of quar debates, Afro-optimism debates, debates. Now, whether or not you disagree with the premise of the argument, the 1AR made the argument and the 2NR did not respond, is probably a reason for why you reject them. They have conceded that their norms of debate is the 19...
Use the topic version of
Yeah. They say topical version of the app. They conceded a few arguments for why they can't. So first is that there's no such thing as retroactive solvency, which means that the affirmative cannot, that T version of the app cannot resolve the impacts of that. It's already in status quo. They have conceded the piece of Hartman evidence that makes an argument for why the political system itself is problematic. The third impact of this is that they have still conceded that the form of violence that is meant on the black body is only because of it for you being black. Now they have also conceded that the T version of the app is only a way to secure the anti-blackness within the debate space. That's the piece of Wilderson and evidence that goes conceded. You will only accept me as far as I engage in your form of debate, in your game, and in your world.
Debate.
Great debate. 2-1, the AF from Iowa.
I sat out. I think that there's a couple of arguments that they win that are kind of tiebreakers for me. I think this is a very close debate, and there's a couple of issues that kind of come down on their side. I think that they win, that there's a risk that institutional reform will spill over to some sort of epistemic shift. I don't think that you have a substantial response shielding you in the other direction. I do think that you're right, that there is an epistemic problem with the way that institutions work, and that an epistemic shift would resolve some of those, but I don't necessarily think that it functions in the opposite way for you. I also don't have really a response to these are co-constituted spheres, which means that acting on them from either angle might be effective. So I do think that like they make some pretty good arguments about why the prison industrial complex runs both ways. And I think also some of your arguments kind of set them up for this a little bit. The way that you frame some of your arguments is that the chattel slavery system has created an epistemic situation that creates the way that people think about themselves. The mind prison is a result of other things. And so I think that they kind of get some access to that stuff. I think that they also kind of win the trend lines argument. I think a lot of your evidence is descriptive of the past, but you don't do a good job of kind of translating that into future predictive possibilities, what might be going on in the SQO or happen in the future. I think they're doing a little bit better of a job than that. In the end, I think that they probably win that they have a method that either solves better or as well as the affirmative that would probably resolve some of my questions about the framework/T debate, which is kind of where I come down on it. I think that those questions are all very close, and some 2AR like distinctions about some of those things, or maybe some specific applications of the Hartman evidence would probably get you over the top for me.
You mentioned at the bottom of your decision that we did do a good job on like extrapolating on the examples. What did that give them, and how did that play into your decision?
On examples wise?
Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the things that you have to do is kind of translate some of the language of things like your Rodriguez and Hartman evidence into the debate that's happening now in the 2AR, right? So this particular debate, and apply it to some of the arguments that they're making about why structural violence might be decreasing in the status quo, right? So I think that you provide a couple of good examples, but I also think that they have both counterexamples and evidence kind of pointing in the opposite direction. And what I think you need to do is take your evidence, which talks about like is descriptive of the status quo and the way that institutions work, and apply it to some of their specific statistics, like indict their methodology, right, of their studies about the trend lines and stuff like that. I think that that gets you kind of over the threshold for me. If you're like, look, all their studies are corrupt, they're performed by these scholars in these ways, this is how they measure people, that's all left up too, right? Those kind of arguments I think get you over the top.
How did you resolve the this adds to the framework resistance debate, which I don't think was answered?
So I think okay, so I had a problem with the resistance debate evidence for one reason. I think the way that that evidence characterizes what they're doing does not necessarily link to the demands they've made of you as the affirmative. They don't make a wrong forum argument at any point, nor do they say that your evidence is not sufficient to meet your claims, which is the only two links in that piece of evidence to the like exclusionary politics. I do think that the description of the evidence about debate being exclusionary is true, but I think the particular way in which they deploy framework in this debate does not link to the kind of. I do have them making an argument about why their framework it does not link to a lot of the impact terms that you're making. Yes, that their standard is not nearly as high as like a you have to be the state, have to be the federal government, have to be the resolution. That they're more of a starting point for further discussions about epistemology kind of question.
I put a departure from Jaker because I think the AF is winning pretty decisively that an epistemic shift is a necessary prerequisite to changing the law and that it works. The Rodriguez evidence, both pieces I think are pretty convincing on this question, and the AF is not deviating away from them in any sense that would give me skepticism. The second place I think is that the Paulson evidence, the LBS solvency stuff is really helpful for the affirmative, and I think you just want to point out that this evidence is not, the way that I read it, it's just like the LBS led to policy shifts. Like they changed schools, they changed things with the community, with incarceration rates and stuff like that. I don't know that it necessarily connects the method of the affirmative to that solvency, right? It's just LBS solves, plus we have its method. I don't know what that connection is, so I think you want to do more there. And so 2&R I think is thin on links and impacts. Like, what are the demands you're placing on the affirmative? And you have two impacts to the 2&R, neoliberalism and presumption. I think they're both a little thin. I think neoliberalism is accessed by affirmative solvency that isn't contested. To me, it's like, seems like you're not grasping with their sequencing explanation that you have some evidence like Chandler, I think, and Chandler gets you at like, we're trapped at the individual level and never get to changing macro structures, but I think that the evidence is better than your cell in the 2&R, and there's not a lot of explanation about why the epistemic shift focus never translates into real world policy out there change, and they're really convincing throughout the debate on like, the schools are where we deputize the police, and so we have to change here to solve there. And so your impact of just neoliberalism, I think, is solved by that. Presumption, can't test or falsify it. Why? Where's the violation here? Where's the extension of like, you don't defend USFG action, so we don't predict your argument. There are no limits, so it's not a good debate, you know? Like, that stuff's in the 1NC and in the 2NC, and it just doesn't make it in the 2&R. And I understand frustration here because it's like, sometimes you lose these debates because you don't have the solvency arguments, and sometimes you lose them because you don't have the violation arguments, but it really is what happened here, that there's just not a good link argument in the 2&R or a strong impact argument. I found the 2&R to be really defensive, which is kind of surprising. You're going for like deliberative model good, but not dealing with these frameworks can coexist, there's no need for policing, right? That's why it gets you back to the link argument. You need but policing good, you know, limits good argument in the 2&R would be really helpful for me. You're getting the most ground for me in the 2&R on the, here's why they can't coexist, or here's why their coexistence is not optimal or ideal, because it's super hard to decide those debates, sort of moral hazard. You're like, hard to decide those debates without that like stable locus, but it's just really a thin part of the 2&R, and I think that
so I guess part of why, okay, if I interrupt,
yeah, totally.
Like I wasn't seeing something in the 1AR that I thought was obvious link defense to those sort of deliberation things, which is part of why I sort of pared down how much I explained them. Was there something that I was missing, I guess?
Maybe there's not a no link, and I don't want to say like I'm voting necessarily on like no link in as much as I'm saying that if you had a discussion of the link argument, it would help me be able to explain to the affirmative why the debates are bad. Does that make sense? Like, why limits is a necessary check? Like, you're like moral hazard, can't decide those debates. You need to do like the debates are bad because the negative can't prepare, can't predict, there's no limit on it, so we like, or just like respond to that. It's like, is what the debate community should just be like Afro-pessimism, queer, black feminism every round? Sorry.
Do you think the 2NC explanation of that was potentially adequate?
Which was what?
The 2NC explanation of sort of the links to like preventing deliberation, just like preventing well-prepared opponents and moral hazard art, etc., like in the overview. Or do you think we just never had a link?
Oh, no. There's certainly links that
or like never had an adequate explanation.
No. I think that explanation exists in the 1NC and probably in the 2NC as well. But
okay, go ahead.
But I just don't understand what demands you're placing on the affirmative. Why is it that their frameworks can't coexist, and what's so bad about it? Like, you're just like, the deliberative model of debate is good. Why do they mess with that? Does that make sense?
There's no magnitude to your link, right? There's no spill over argument. Like, they say include your deliberation and their act, right? So yes, you have links, but there's no way for me to quantify what the internal link to your impact is. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the issue for me, is there's a gap there. Like, they have made the argument that you should posit both of these models. You have only extended kind of shallowly two link arguments that don't get you enough of an impact for me to kind of overwhelm the inclusion and the impact that they won to the inclusion of the app, right? So
I think they win no T version of the app. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, I don't think you win T version of the app argument. If you do, you're in much better shape.
Definitely.
But I don't think you did.
So that
make more sense. Like that,
I think
that
so.
was my big issue, right? Like I think I agree with most of the things. I thought it like almost hurt you to just focus on this neolib art in the 2NR. I thought that the diversity of impacts that you had in the 2NC was a lot better. And potentially some of the other examples you have in the 2NC are less easily accessed by their argument. You know what I mean? Like I think when choosing what impacts you're gonna go for in this debate, make sure the app can access them, right? Like what things is policy kind of analysis necessary to solve that aren't structured by anti-blackness and the way the 1AC has described the world, right? I think that puts you in a little bit of a better spot for me, but I think that they, like, I agree entirely about this LBS thing. I have never found this to be like a super persuasive argument, but I just don't think you all play a lot of D here. Like, they basically get away with being like, the LBS proves the epistemic of the break that the app can affect material change in the world, and you too much let them get away with that explanation, and it almost gives them like a still up to reformism argument, which is not where you want to let them get with their app. You know, so I end up just kind of thinking that the app is one that the kind of, there are epistemology first arguments, right? And that there's some access to the violence that they're talking about that can only be addressed through an epistemological shift rather than the other way around, right? And I do think they have examples there. Do I think that reform can deal with some of that violence? Sure. Like, I think you're winning some of that, but I do think that they've won that there's an access to it and properly address it. You should be able to include their app.
Thanks for the app. I think you need a little bit better of an answer to read it on the neg solves.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a pretty strong critique against most legalization apps.
I felt as though the 1NC and 2NC didn't focus as much, but if they were to make that pivot, I would have definitely tethered to that. I felt as though I saw the overview saying that this is not a question of legal legislative, rather debating well-prepared debaters, which is why we're just like, well, well-prepared debaters, we can coexist. We the Dr. Brinkley evidence about regurgitation versus reproduction of evidence and so on and so forth. But I'll take that. I'll write that down.
Did you have any suggestion for that, like what we should say against reading on the neck?
I don't know.
Did anybody have any?
I mean, I'm not really sure. I haven't like thought a ton about it. It's just like that's kind of like the debate. They're like, there's a topical version. You can do it on the app.
We mitigated that.
You can do it on the neg. It's like I don't know. Why is that? Do you need this education every round? It's just like I don't know. I don't know what. There's no response to it really, so I don't know how to improve it. And the second thing that gave me a little bit of pause is like if they had been better on the link level of the T argument, then like presumption, can't test the app, can't falsify it, kind of stuff would have had more weight for me, because I don't think there's an answer to it from you all.
What do you think? Like, I was trying to go for the art because I saw this. Like, I don't know if it was on the case or the framework flow, but they were saying that you're only a description of the past, and we're saying the description of the past shaped that. Like, okay, so if we win the argument that the slave body has rendered the current day black body inevitably a criminal, that means that any policy making will still leave you as a criminal. Like, is that not like enough of a, this is what the status quo is?
And it just seems to be like another warrant for why epistemic shift first is necessary, right? Which I think you're already winning.
Yeah.
So.
In your response to read it on the neg question, I think a strategy that you might think about is reading it on the neg isn't nearly as radical as reading it on the affirmative, right? Taking the resolution as a point of contestation and being in an antagonistic relationship with the resolution can only occur when we're at. When we're neg, we're in an antagonistic relationship with the affirmative. That's a completely different kind of setup, right? And so in order for us to critique the resolution itself as an institutional structure that is oppressive, we have to do this on the app. Because if we do it on the neg, we're only critiquing your interpretation of institutions, not the way that debate norms as a whole structure.
All right, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Thank you all for judging.
Yeah, thank you for judging everyone.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Good debate.
Yeah, congrats, y'all.
Good round.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm okay with having it on a